and you have questions of me, I'd be happy to answer anything and everything right now. And I also understand that our campus newspaper is going to put on a little forum in the quad, 12 to 1 on Wednesday, and I'll certainly be out there as well to the extent I'm wanted or needed to answer any questions. But for right now, since we're all here, I understand part of you are with the Sustainability Club, part of you are here for a free dinner, part of you are here for a movie at 7 o'clock, but I'm sure part of you are here for this budget conversation. So please, if you have questions of me, fire away.
We're going to go through what we have to discuss, and after a little bit, we're going to have an open discussion and conversation where questions will be held. We just want to lay everything out.
I want to hear just about everybody's opinions about what they think, what is going on, how they feel. That's basically how I think we should do this.
Maybe, I don't think you're going to want me here for all that, because I'm sure there's some stuff you don't want me here for.
I think it'd be great for you.
I think it'd be great for you to stick around.
Maybe, but what I need to do maybe is, because I'm not sure how often you guys read the papers and you don't know how, like, the budget cuts we've already taken from the school, or from the state, I'm sorry. This year alone, on about a $42 million budget, we've taken $4.6 million in cuts. You can imagine how many classes $4.6 million paid for. An adjunct costs about $3,000 for a class. Most of these classes that we end up cutting are adjuncts. So if you divide 4.6 million by 3,000, you'll get an idea about how many classes the state is essentially cutting from us. At the same time, I'll say that the last few years, more what they call FTEs, full-time equivalent students, than we were paid for. Last year we were paid for 8,700 full-time equivalent students, which is, any of you that are taking 15 units per semester for 2 semesters, that equals 1 FTE. We were paid for 87 of you full-time equivalent students. We generated over 10,600, so almost 2,000 full-time equivalent students we generated. We had 2,000 additional full-time equivalent students on this campus than we got paid for. That's about $9 million worth if they would have paid us for it. The state did not pay us for it, but I have to say, and again, this was under our former president, I have to say that we all agreed that we should do that. We felt like it was good for the community, good for the students, and we could do it. Even though things were very, very tight the last couple of years, we could still afford to generate that much more than we were getting paid for. The challenge is, last year they told us, listen, next year it's going to be the toughest in the 100-year history of the community college system. Prepare for a huge cut in the magnitude of $4 to $5 million. That is when our former president made the call to, again, eliminate summer school and trim back on fall and spring offerings, only because we couldn't afford any longer to provide education to 2,000 students more than what we were getting paid for. It's just, it's just kind of like, I think all of you are probably willing to volunteer, but you can't just consistently work for free for your entire life. And that's kind of the dead end that we hit. Is that for several years we've educated a lot more than what we were getting paid for. This year, the fact that we've seen $4 or $5 million in budget cuts, we're just no longer able to do that, at least for the time being. And that's why I think you see so many hundreds of thousands of students, community college, CSU, UC, you see all of them rushing the gates in Sacramento because they realize that the prisons aren't taking the hit we are, the cities and the counties aren't taking the hit that we are, healthcare is not taking the hit that we are, but higher education is absolutely taking the brunt of all of this, even more so than K-12.
Okay, we kind of want to interrupt now.
Sure.
I have a question for Mr. Calvin.
Can we hold the question for just a second?
Well, I wanted to ask him about this job that they're hiring for the academic vice president position. They're going to pay him or her $152,000.
Well, that's the maximum pay scale.
And it's only $3,000 for an adjunct. That's a lot of adjunct instructors. That would cover a summer session, wouldn't it?
Well,
a whole summer session?
Whole summer session costs $1.3 million.
$750,000 for summer school.
We saved $1.3 million on summer school by not running it.
How much do you have in reserve?
Our general fund reserve is 5%.
How much are you getting in July?
Well,
How much are you gonna get in October?
When we get paid in July or August, we've been deferred $10 million. So we borrowed to make payroll last month and this month and next month. And then when the state finally, that's the other thing, not only does the state cut our money, but they take a third of our money. A third of that $42 million I referenced earlier, about $13 million, they push it forward into the next year. That's the smoke and mirrors that the state uses to make the budget work this year. They push a lot of our money into the next fiscal year.
$150,000. That's a lot of money to pay your faculty or administrators when you could put that to
And I
something
don't
that would
think,
be
again,
beneficial
that's the
to
top
them.
pay range. It runs from, what does it run from?
Was it 130?
Yeah, I mean, we have a faculty member making a $170,000,
Their
$180,000.
secretaries make $80,000 to $90,000.
Is that $130,000 a month?
No,
No,
a year,
No, it's
annual
an
salary.
annual.
But their secretaries make
That's our
$80,000 to
VP, that's our vice
$90,000
president.
just to be
That's
a
our second in charge,
secretary.
yeah.
Well, what about
So we're
the
gonna
$13 million in the reserve?
How many?
The $13 million on the balance sheet?
We don't have $13 million. I'm sorry.
So
We're
the
being
Visalia
misled.
times delta is why.
How about these questions from, this is an
We do
email.
not have $13 million in reserve, I guarantee you.
Our school had a positive audit.
Positive
Very
audit.
Positive audit.
It basically says we're doing things right. But we do things
The
right by
district
only...
has submitted legal reports to the state of California testifying there is no financial crisis, and the district does not foresee any crisis in the future. In the recent fact-finding before the California Public Employees Relationship Board, the district testified that there is no financial reason for current actions. The district has reported that they currently have between $10 to $14 million in reserve, and they are scheduled to receive another $10 million in deferred payments from the state of California, totaling over $10 million in July. The total reserves will amount to over $20 million. 1 year of summer school equals $750,000. 2 years equals $1.5 million. There's no financial reason that summer school has been canceled for the last 2 years. There's more than sufficient money to cover the cost.
Guys, I'm sorry, but you're being completely misled on that. We have about $2.5 million in reserve. Anything, we're currently building a campus in Tulare with bond money that can't be used for anything else. That money comes from the state. It sits in a reserve account.
In
until
which
the
they'll make
contractors-
money off of too, just like Hanford Center. They'll make a crap load of money in reserves just for that.
Didn't we
And
raise
what-
funds in Visalia for, and aren't you using those funds to build campuses in Tulare? When the initiative
No, it's bond money.
Is that a
The
fiduciary?
The residents of Tulare,
How much is in the
I didn't know
fiduciary
California
fund?
Public Employees
I'm not sure
Relations
what
Board
that is.
of fact-finding who does the audits would be misleading. I didn't know that.
I didn't know how they could print it. I didn't know how they
I didn't know how they
could
could
print
print
it.
it and make it public information.
who typed up that?
Who typed up
This is all
what?
public knowledge that came out of the fact.
Fact find.
That's not true. You're being misled.
No,
I'm sorry.
what we're talking about is from the.
Misleading us.
What we're talking about right now was.
Questions that came across from an email from faculty member here at COF. Maybe the show next the one that talks about fiduciary fund.
I've never heard of the fiduciary fund. And I'm not sure where Robert would have heard of the fiduciary fund.
That doesn't surprise me.
It's weird, I've heard of that before though, actually.
What about the money that was borrowed from the Measure I
fund?
fund?
2011 year with a reserve balance of more than 2.8 million.
That's true. That is true, and that's what we're required to hold from the state. 5% is what we're required to hold from the state, or we risk being taken over by the state. So the $2.8 million is a true reserve,
So by taking over the state, what do you mean by taking over by the state?
where the state would come in and run the college and cut it down to bare bones just to run it. Like they wouldn't tap into any kind of reserve.
So is that better or worse than a private college that charges
Essentially,
$200
to privatize the college, really. I think moving forward, a lot of the students here are concerned about like having a transfer, institution instead of a privatized institution. And I think with the money guaranteed by the state to move forward with the C6, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. The Central California Community College is committed to change, and that's pretty much what they're talking about right now, privatizing the community colleges, having the state take over, having them set up SEPs, which are student educational plans, and you have to follow through that. And if you, for some reason, can't follow those guidelines, it's just an easy way to get you out of the system or get you in the system and get you out as soon as possible.
That's part of the Student Success Task Force from the
Exactly.
Chancellor's Office.
And you guys are also guaranteed, I think they have $20 million coming in if you guys commit to change. And I'm positive that West Hills is actually leading.
West Hills is leading that.
Exactly. And they're actually, the students there are advocating that they want to change to a privatized education in an institution where we have no opportunity to go to these UCs, to go to these CSUs. Essentially, we're going to stay here, get a certificate, and they're going to hand you a certificate for you to stay here in town and work for Tulare County for the rest of your life.
I'm not sure where that, I don't see that logic. I mean, there has been, Santa Monica College has tried to privatize summer school.
And the students stood up against that several weeks ago.
Well, so did the state. The state chancellor said, no way,
Because the students stood up.
you can't do that. The chancellor's office and even the Department of Finance said it's illegal. You can't do that. But in terms of the C6 and the Student Success Task Force that the state, the entire state, representatives from all the colleges came up with the Student Success Task Force. Basically, it's not about privatizing education. It's about bringing students in, making sure they have an orientation, making sure they have a student ed plan, making sure they stick to that student ed plan so they can transfer after 2 or 3 years. Instead of, we have students that have been here for 7, 8 years, have 150 units, could have transferred 5 years ago, but are still taking classes. And that's what
How are we going to do that now with classes being cut? I'm trying to get into a bio class.
I hear you.
They just cut my poli-sci
How am I
class,
going to get out in
and,
2 years?
I'm
looking 6 years.
And even if you got out in 2 years, where would you go? Because Fresno State has closed their doors.
is closed.
Cal Poly's closed their doors. CSU,
I could go out of California. I don't have to stay here, but you.
But then you're non-resident, and your tuition's going to go through the roof. What we need to do is talk about something positive that we can do to fix this.
Exactly.
Not complain about what's wrong.
Definitely.
What is
well,
the
that's why we're here,
administration
to
doing?
discuss and throw out ideas.
What's the faculty doing? What do we need to do?
Administration.
I mean, I've emailed the governor, the assembly members, our senators for our district. What else can we do?
continue doing that. And there's also hundreds of thousands of students that are marching on Sacramento. They're calling their legislators and saying, "Hey, you're killing us. You're not touching cities and counties. You're not touching K through 12 at this point. I'm sure K through 12 will get theirs next year, but you're not touching K through 12 at this point. But you're killing higher ed. I'm a community college student. I can't get my classes right now, and even if I can, and when I do, I won't be able to transfer to any of the CSUs or UCs, and I'm forced to pay several hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a private education."
Well, I get financial
Are you
aids.
going to address these misleading facts that they were reading off?
Absolutely. There's no $20 million in reserve. There's a $2.8 million general fund reserve, which is what we're required to keep.
Like, are you going to address the person that wrote that though? Like, not just here
I
at
don't
this
know.
meeting.
I don't know who did it.
The Visalia Times Delta?
Well, but
We'd
the,
like
the,
to
tw-
see
the,
some
the $20 million
response
is
Brian
on.
Maxey?
There was no $20 million. There's the $14 million the campus has in reserve.
And then the additional, what they're gonna get in July would make it.
And again, that's just a payment of our $40 million that we get this year. That's the money that we need to run the college. And so, and again, they're deferring about a third of what we get for every year until summer. So we're borrowing right now. We're borrowing the money they owe us. We're borrowing from banks just so we can make payroll, keep the lights on.
And I understand
And make
that you guys
payroll,
have
but yet hire
careers
somebody
and that
else?
you guys worked hard to get to where you are right now. But if this campus is in such dire straits for, we have to cut down all these classes and all these, summer school and everything, why are you with this job opening right now,
Yeah.
why are you giving them the maximum amount you could possibly legally give them?
We're not giving the maximum. Basically what it says the pay scale is between 104 and 152.
130,000 and
I think
whatever he said,
He just read off the
150,000.
highest of the pay scale. That pay scale has been set for years and years.
That's an
we don't
optional.
have to pay that. You get paid based on how much education you have, if you have a doctorate, things like that. Just like our faculty, just like anybody else.
just
So
like
what are
us
you
when we
making?
graduate.
This year, I'm making $170,000.
Didn't you just say the highest pay scale was $140,000?
No, it's
for the-
150 for that
that
position.
position.
For a VP. And next year, when I go back to being a dean, I'll make, I think it's 122.
Wasn't it unwise growth to have all these buildings built though? And then now, are you going to have the money to run the huge stadium and to move everything out to Tulare and
Or
have
even fill
the
out the
new
buildings?
Hanford buildings? I mean, that was unwise growth, don't you think, at a time where you're having to cut classes?
Well, the thing is, when we got that money, or approved for that money, it was 7 or 8 years ago.
Fresno State's closed.
it was seven or 8 years ago is when we were approved
It's not
for the money to build Tulare. And so when it came time to actually take the money, about $80 million in this area. You can imagine what kind of economic growth $80 million does for this community. We could have said no. We could have said, you know what, state, keep your 80,000 or 80 million, keep it in San Francisco or send it down to Los Angeles. We don't want it here. Now, I don't think any of the taxpayers would want to say no to $80 million.
But what are we going to do with empty buildings? That's really the question.
Was
I don't think it'll be
the
empty.
intention?
I
If
think
there's not that many classes to be put in there, what are you going to
I think what'll happen is
You don't have enough
there'll be
money
a
to pay your
shift.
teachers. How are you going to put students in the
We're
building?
paying
They
our
don't,
teachers.
they don't have enough money to put a cafeteria in the Tulare building.
All right, well, let's address one problem at a time.
Yeah.
How about that? Let him answer one question, then after he's done, I haven't even written down one answer because everyone keeps jumping him on
So
me.
in Tulare, right now, we have let's say a head count of 12,000 students on this campus. Probably 3,000 of those have zip codes in Tulare, and so we're going to transfer a piece of our staff, our current staff, down there, pretty much in proportion to 3,000 students, and we'll pay more energy costs, but we're already paying that farm because the farm is moving out to Tulare. So the energy is taken care of. We'll move staff down there, and those 3,000 students that have Tulare zip codes will, in my opinion, will have a brand new extra students on this campus.
It'll save me gas money.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is that going to cover different areas, or is that just going to be the farm? Is that just going to be the
Oh no,
agriculture?
great question. No, it'll be. We have some. We always put an anchor program. Like in Hanford, we have our police academy. In Tulare, we'll have the farm and the architecture program and our welding program. But we'll also have comprehensive classes: English, math, history,
Undergraduate.
and so forth.
That'll be me, because I just live down the street from there, and I would love to go to
And
school there.
we've
and
also
not
worked
way
with the
over here.
cities to have a bus route between Tulare, Visalia, and Hanford. for
How is
students.
that
In
being
the country.
funded?
How's the bond obtained for the new farm, the 500-acre facility in Tulare?
In 2008, we had a bond measure for Tulare, Measure J, and we had one here, Measure I. And we asked residents of Visalia to upgrade classrooms and do a variety of things here. In Tulare, we said that a $40 to $50 million bond there would bring in another 80 million from the state in matching funds, and they passed it there. So Visalia has theirs, Tulare has theirs. Hanford actually has theirs from 2006, Measure C, which is how we built that one out there. And when we can raise local bond money, local taxpayers like me, and I'm sure some of you that own property, we pay in bond money, and then the state matches it, sometimes even more than 1-to-1, and that's how we funded the three campuses. That's how we've been able to modernize this campus as well.
Are we using just the funds that are raised in Tulare for the Tulare campus, or are we using funds that are raised from Visalia to
You can't do it.
go? No?
What happens
Okay.
with the bonds if the bonds are not able to be paid back?
Well, we issue those bonds, and people buy them. So the money we have, people have already bought those. People have already bought those bonds, and the taxpayers pay that annually. As a property owner, I pay that. I pay my little piece every single year to pay those bonds back. That's how a bond works.
Is there something like that you guys are looking into to maybe try and help us out of this situation?
Well, you can't use bond money. You cannot use bond construction money to fund teacher salaries, more classes, books, operational expenses. What the state is looking into right now is something they call a parcel tax. There's one community college district in California, San Mateo, up north, that did it. And what a parcel tax is it's not a percentage of your property value. It's a flat rate for every property owner. And so we could set it at $10 or $20 per year for every piece of property. So if you owned 100 acres, you pay $20. If you owned an eighth of an acre, you pay $20 a year. But we figured out that in our county, $25 a year would equal about $2 million. That's one of the strategies that we have for being able to bring summer school back eventually, because I frankly don't think that the state is ever going to pay us enough to include summer school. It's just, I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see that. And so we've been looking at some way to bring summer back, and one of the ways is through a parcel tax. The only challenge is, right now you got to get 67% of the vote to pass a parcel tax, and that's a pretty high number when you're doing these types of things. There's legislation that's pending right now in the state legislature, and it's to reduce that threshold to 55%, which may still be a challenge. I mean, there's still a lot of property owners that wouldn't even want to pay $20 a year, unfortunately. But it's worth a chance, and that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah. The Tulare building. I'm in the graphic design classes, and we heard rumors that those classes might be transferring to Tulare. Is that true or not?
That whole, yeah, the architecture program, and I assume that it includes the GD as well?
I believe so, but...
You can talk to Mr. Gonzalez Rolando that runs that program, because I think the architecture program is going. Now, whether he's taking the GDs as well, I don't know. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yes.
What about, I know like we had Measure R
Yeah, that's
that increased their sales tax to fix the roads.
Yep, that would be...
Is there something like that, I mean, that you guys are working on? Or?
Unfortunately, no. Measure R is great.
Something to generate more revenue?
Our equivalent would be a parcel tax.
That's it?
I believe so, because the Measure R, you can't use. They couldn't use that for salaries.
No, they could only use it for the roads.
Exactly, and it's kind of like our bond measures. It's kind of like our local bond measures. We can only use it to build stuff, just like they can only use Measure R to build streets.
Was the cost of operating taken into account when you guys decided to use the grant money? Because I know that obviously, I mean, it's a bigger facility than it was over in Hanford, and Tulare is going to be a bigger facility than the farm. That's going to cost an awful lot to operate compared to what was already costing.
Well, initially, we don't have to use it all. That's one thing. But I mean, this was one point in time where we could secure the future for the next 50 years. When this campus was built 80 years ago, it was fairly controversial. And when the farm was built out on Linwood, it was really controversial. And so the fact that we have Tulare, we may not need it all initially, but for us to get $80 million from the state, that was never going to happen again. I mean, that was literally a once in a generation opportunity, and we were able to take it. And remember, at that time, the entire system was still in growth mode. I mean, we were serving 3,000 more students than we were getting paid for. It's growth mode. And right now, I mean, we're all suffering because of the national and state economy, but that's going to snap back eventually. And if we haven't prepared to include all of our students, I mean, you look at the growth charts for the Central San Joaquin Valley. This little campus here will not be able. We were just 2 years ago with 14,000 head count. It was a zoo around here, and I'm sure if any of you were here, you can attest to that. Our campus police is here; he can attest to that. It was an absolute zoo. And the fact that we're down to about 12,000 head count does make it manageable. But it was a zoo at 14,000. But the growth in the Central San Joaquin Valley is going to continue to escalate. And if we don't have some other kind of facility for students, your younger siblings and certainly your children will not have any opportunity. So while it's very difficult to staff those buildings right now in Tulare, at some point in the future, the money will come back. We will be able to staff it, and we will be able to accommodate all of your younger siblings and all of your kids, which is very, very important, because the opportunity to build a new campus wasn't going to come again, at least in my career.
So can I interrupt real quick? Just so you're saying that sometime in the future, our families, our children will have the chance to go to college. For the meantime, we are out.
Right.
Well, again, we're still this next semester in fall. How many classes do you think we're offering in the fall? Well, we're not closing down the school.
Depending on how many they cut.
There's 116 sections.
How many classes are we offering in the fall?
Sure.
I mean,
you guys only get funded for like 7,200 students next fall. Is that you guys' funding for next?
No, for full-time equivalent students, next year we'll be paid for about 8,200 full-time equivalent students. If the November tax measure doesn't pass, that goes down to 78, which will be less than what we were paid for 20 years ago.
Is that the 8% that you guys are talking about having to cut?
Well, we're just, our 8% just gets us down into the neighborhood of what we're getting paid for. Because this year we'll probably generate 9,000 full-time equivalent students. The state is only paying us for 8,200.
Is that what the new measures are about the withdrawals? Having 3 withdrawals, you won't be able to repeat a class? Is that
Oh, the
those are-
repeat.
That's not a COS thing. That is a
So
statewide law.
is that a statewide law to
Yeah.
reduce the amount of students in college?
I think it's to keep students from taking the same class 6 or 7 times because taxpayers got tired of their kids wanting to take a math class for the first time. They can't get in it, and why? Because somebody's taking it for the 5th time or 6th time. So the legislators did that here 2 or 3 months ago, and although it's certainly tough on current students that have flunked that many times, I can still see the logic behind it.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm like really close to my associates in science, but if I get cut and I don't get to go back to school next semester, and I'm not going to be able to graduate, then what?
Well, you shouldn't be cut. If you're close, then you should have all the priority.
She's
you
talking
need.
about her classes being cut.
Yeah.
One of the 8%.
If I'm one of that part, and I'll be, because I'm like really close, then what's going to happen? I'm just going to be like in the limbo, just like whatever.
So what happens to the students that get their classes cut even though they were already enrolled in them? Like what's their next step? Like
What we're trying to do is identify classes with very few students in them at this point. And I looked on our computers today, and there are several hundred with less than 10 students, and there's multiple sections of those classes. So it's our thought that when classes do get cut, they'll be able to either go into other classes at a different time or crash. And to answer your question, that would apply to you as well. If you happen to be if your one class that you need is one of the, say, 80 out of 1,200 classes that's cut, that's what we're talking about. We have about 11 or 1,200 classes scheduled for fall, and we're probably looking at 8% of that, about 80 classes. So if your class is not one of the 92% that is staying, then you would need to go and see if there's another section of that, crash a class. And I think our faculty are great about, if they know how close you are, they're almost always willing to accommodate students.
Of that 80 classes, what's going to happen with the instructors and professors?
Have they volunteered to take a pay cut that they will be losing with those classes?
They're all part-time instructors that won't be teaching that class. So I don't think full-timers will not lose a class by contract.
So part-timers will be.
Okay, my son just enrolled. He's going into college in the fall from high school. What about those kids?
Well, again, they'll have difficulty finding classes here, Porterville, Reedley, West Hills.
Anywhere.
I think
They're out of luck.
I mean,
campus closed down or what?
No, they're still open, but they're still limited.
I think Hartnell College in Salinas just announced yesterday they're cutting 30% of their classes for fall. 30% of their classes are going away at Hartnell and Salinas. Yep.
I got a letter back from Connie Conway. She said that there's another 1.4 billion direct hit to higher education in California coming this year. Do you know anything about that one?
My night's already going bad enough. Don't tell me that.
Well, she said there's another 300 million coming in December as well, and I'm just wondering if you know.
I don't know. I know if you have you heard of the governor's tax measure?
Yes.
If that does not pass, we will take another 5.5% cut, about $2.1 million. Now, other than that, I'm not aware. I know that yesterday the governor announced that he's $2 or $3 billion short in his revenue projections that he made just a few months ago, and so I think we're all just kind of waiting on pins and needles, hoping that doesn't translate into another mid-year cut for us. She's been waiting patiently.
I've actually heard the same thing because I'm running for ASB president, so this has actually been really close to me, so I've actually done a study, and I have heard that too. You continue to say, like, at the state and national, so are you saying that we should be complaining to the legislature?
Absolutely.
Instead of just you guys?
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I've also heard, and this is actually from the vice president himself, that the demographic in 20 years, the demographics will be in Tulare, and that is why. Wouldn't you define a generation as 20 years? Because you said this is once in a generational thing. So if the demographics won't be there in 20 years, why don't we just hold off and wait those 20 years and use that extra money for the mothership?
Well, we wouldn't have the extra money. The extra money came from bonds, which we cannot use for anything other than building construction. If we were going to build the campus, we wouldn't have the money. The money was raised through bonds to pay for that, and that's the only thing we can pay for.
We couldn't build up here.
Well, we have been. I mean, we built this building, that building, the nurses building on the other side. We've remodeled several classrooms, made them all smart. That's been with Visalia bond money that has to stay here on this campus, and the Tulare bond money has to stay in Tulare to build that campus.
What about the contracts for building these buildings?
Excuse me?
What about the contracts for building these buildings? How is the contracts built?
We're a public agency, so it has to follow. We actually go through what we call multiple primes, so we don't pay a general contractor. We have multiple primes. So the concrete company will have a direct contract with the college. The structural steel will have. So we're not paying the percentage for a general contractor.
Do you know the companies off the top of your head?
Is that?
Companies off the top of your head?
Total, there's probably 100.
The major players, the highest bidders?
Again, it's probably 100, and I would say with an $80 million, $100 million, $120 million contract, you'd have 20 of $2 million involved.
You said the top three because you are the size business, so I would expect you.
Well, Clausen Corporation has a large one. Bealey Construction has a large one. Casco is structural steel. They have a large one. Who else have I seen down there? Probably Solillo Electric has a large one.
The job that I've been looking for is I've taken 3 classes here. Art 15, Macintosh for art designers and artists, and I've taken Computers 5, Basics with Brian Bencourt, and then the other one that I took was Art 15 Print Making with Kevin Bowman.
Oh, Bowen, yeah.
And I had really a great time, and we got to do some things with a man by the name of Matt, who's from the Midwest. He's from Denver, or anyhow, my question was pertaining to going and using your own equipment in order to get your homework to actually help you flow if you are into the arts, and you're looking into getting a part-time job in that company called, have you heard of Knop? No. It's spelled Knopf. It's over here off of yeah, they're a graphic design. Have you heard of Knop? It's a graphic design or engineering. I don't take engineering classes, but I have fiddled with some of the ways that AutoCAD, computer aided drafting, and free system checks. My question is, how do I get myself into a job if I'm still interested in when I got my high school diploma from when I was at Golden West?
So I would say
because I'm
a career center, a career transfer center.
A career center. So a career center would really, because they have one there, and I worked with Judy Garland, and I worked with the dean here. I worked with is it Corrigan or is it?
I can show you what a career center is.
Okay, maybe I was.
I think that got
Eric's not actually fine.
I saw the opportunity. I saw the opportunity come up.
Yeah, it's a great.
It's a company over here, and I noticed that you guys had.
I got one right here. He's waiting patiently.
I think we should do 2 more questions or 3 more questions because it's almost 7 o'clock.
Yes,
since it's illegal to borrow from bonds, do you know if back before the first summer school classes were canceled, members of the Board of Trustees had borrowed from bonds and then were struggling to pay those bonds back? so they had to make cuts to cover the borrowing.
You know, it's not, well, first of all, it's not illegal to borrow from bonds. It's illegal to use bond money to do anything other than construction. And I'm not aware of anything like that about borrowing, having to make cuts to make up for it. These cuts are a result of anything other than the fact that right now we're generating about 800 FTS, full-time equivalents more than what the city's paying for. Wow. It's like somebody asking you, hey, come out and work a month for free type thing. And I know there's good reason. I mean, for years we've served more students than what we're getting paid for, and we've been happy to do it. This year, with the $4 or $5 million in budget cuts, it's become increasingly difficult to do that.
So you can borrow from bonds.
You can borrow from bonds.
So the larger agriculture campus that was built in Tulare, that was used, bond money was used for that. It can't be used for anything other than construction.
Correct.
By building a larger agricultural facility that is, I mean, from as far as I know, explicitly petrol-based, won't the cost of running that facility just continue to go up? And would it also detract from all other campuses that are associated with it?
I don't believe it will. I'm not an energy expert, but I do know we've built that campus to run very, very efficiently, maybe twice as efficiently as this campus. I think if any campus is inefficient, it's this one because it's 80 years old.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming out here and answering all of our questions. But what are some things that are actually happening right now that are actually already in motion? I mean, I know you've said a couple things with tax and stuff like that that are going to be in motion in a couple, whenever they go in. What are some things that you have right now that are actually already in motion to, better the future for us?
To deal with
deal with what we're going through right now, the budget cuts, things like that, and just some of the things that are actually in motion.
Where we've been able to over the last couple of years, we haven't replaced certain positions. Now, we don't always have that opportunity. A VP of instruction, where we have an interim job right now, if we don't have an interim or a VP in place, we risk losing our accreditation, like all other community colleges do in the fall, and then none of our credits are transferable. So we don't want to tinker with anything that's going to screw up our accreditation. But when somebody retires or somebody leaves the district over the last few years, we've been very judicial in how we replace that. I think we're down 15 or 20 staff people, classified staff people, since that time. We tried to do the same thing on the management side. We've cut back on some of our part-time instruction, even though that's very, very painful. We have cut back on supply budgets. We have just done a number of things like that, just trying to be more efficient. I mean, we have some escalating costs. Every single year our benefit costs go up drastically. We pay about, on this campus for our employees, we pay about $4 or $5 million for health benefits, and last year it only went up by 4%. The year before it went up by 8%. This next year,
was that number 400, 500 million? 4 to 5.
No, $4 to $5 million for
And you said that was
healthcare,
correct?
That's healthcare, yeah.
Okay, how do you explain that the faculty only gets healthcare until the age of 62, and then they're expected to go on Medicare, when the Board of Trustees get it for the lifetime and only being on there for 4 years?
Well, first of all, we've had board members on there for 17 years, 18 years.
But you don't have to be on there that long to get that health care for the lifetime if you're on there for 4 years.
To my knowledge, there is nothing in place right now that guarantees board members get any health care after they leave the board. I think at one time, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a provision, as there was for a lot of faculty members and administrators, that said, hey, if you stay for a certain amount of time, you can get lifetime benefit. And we have a handful of people that are in, I mean, former presidents maybe had that deal, maybe some board members, several, maybe 5 or 10 faculty members from the early 80s when they retired, they got it. But as a rule, that's never been just a sure thing. It's normally been a golden handshake or something like that.
If students wanted to find out those facts, where would they go?
You can send me an email on that.
But you just said you don't know.
Well, you can look into it.
I know where
You can look into it. Okay. You can look into it. Are you promising the students that you will respond to that email then?
Absolutely. You send it to me directly, and I'll go look at our fiscal, and I'll tell you exactly how many people are getting lifetime benefits. And I'm thinking it's probably 15 people from quite a long time ago. The standard is that you get it if you retire and you've been with the district more than 20 years, a faculty person, whether it's me or any of our faculty people, I think they've left now. If Mr. Tidwell stays here 20 years, and he started really early, he's still only about 35. But if he works 20 years, and then decides to retire before he's 62, the policy is that he would continue getting benefits until he is 62 years old, when Medicare can kick in. So that's just a kind of a perk, and that may have to be changed. But we don't have a whole lot of those. Most people, if they retire, they're pretty close to 62.
Did you just say that might have to be changed to save money, or to?
Statewide, they're looking at that. Statewide, they're looking at those kinds of benefits. Yes.
To go back to when you said that in order to make more opportunity for future generations of your children and family members, we have to make cuts to our current systems.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, what did you say? What did you say?
I said I was being asked about why we even built a Tulare Center, and it was with bond money. So that money is not taken away from anything here.
Said, a while back, I can ask this question. A while back, you said that you were like making some sacrifices. I can't remember which one. Anyone else can help me with what I'm saying?
A lot of sacrifices.
Why we're in a group.
He was saying, well, what he was saying was that he built the Tulare Center when he could. Eventually, the economy is going to turn around, and they will have staffing and money and students to fill that campus too. But he was building it when he could.
That's some point in borrow bonds. When the economy turns around, though.
But at this point, it's but the money was a gift.
Opportunity arise. Can I get your email address? Because it doesn't come everywhere.
But when that money comes, though, that's still in speculation. We don't know.
Yeah.
What's that?
So, like,
the bond money? The bond money's already in. The bond money.
No, he's saying when the economy turns around in general.
Oh,
yeah. So that's still in speculation. So for now, though, we're taking the we're taking the risk of it.
The cuts are not a result of Tulare, though. That's all I'm saying. Your cuts here aren't a result of anything about Tulare. That's being done with bond money.
Well, what are the running of Tulare, though?
So, in other words, moving forward to deal with the...
I didn't get to my point.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I
Go
didn't
ahead.
get to my point, though. What I was trying to say was that if we're taking the risk from now, that when the economy eventually turns around to the future generations, though, how, since that's not a guarantee when that's going to happen, how are we going to make sure that it'll be better for the future generations that we're not getting the education we need to get prepared now to pay for their education?
And another
Complain to your legislators.
Yeah, exactly.
Give everybody.
Give them one of those. Give them
pretty
that.
much moving forward to deal with the situation of budget cuts. The campus is committed to change, right? Are you guys going to move forward with the C6?
We're working with the C6.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now.
And that's another thing that I would like to say. Our generation, California is known to be like last. They rank last in like bachelor's degrees. So my concern for us, here in the Central Valley, are we just? They say that it's the community college's fault that we're not producing enough transfer students, and we can't fill those gaps. So how are we going to be committed to change and just keep these students here? You know what I'm saying? If we're not working with them and building hybrid institutions where they're connected to like four-year institutions and CSUs, you know what I'm saying, to keep our institute, our
That's a great
generation
question.
going.
And the biggest part about that is in the Student Success Task Force, as well as some of what the C6 is working on, is just ways to keep students incentivized to do well. Get them an orientation right off the bat. Get them an SCP. Make them check in to make sure they're following their SAP and not just taking a class here, class here, class here, but staying on path. Not taking classes and dropping them 5-6 times like used to be kind of the norm. So the people like you and you and you and you, if you want to take a math class your first or second semester in here, you're not closed out because there's someone occupying your seat that's already taken it 4 or 5 times. That's what Student Success Task Force is about.
But they're cutting. It just seems like like all the classes that they're cutting are like they don't fit into their little criteria of what you need to do to get a certificate here. You know what I'm saying? They're all geared up to either be a nurse or whatever, the high demand jobs. But I'm saying when we do have enough people and when we give enough people certificates to fill in those high demand jobs, are we not just like forming a bubble? And then eventually those, the jobs are going to be filled after a while. And what are we going to do with those people still, coming in?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what all educators are facing right now. Is that even Fresno State, they're graduating business degrees, even MBAs, they can't find a job right now. It's a real challenge, and I don't have an answer for that other than to keep on doing our best to make sure that when jobs do come back, you're ready. I just don't think it's healthy to have people occupying seats that maybe have had 4, 5, 6 cracks at the same class, while there's people that haven't had their chance yet, and that's what the Student Success Task Force is.
I definitely agree with you on that. But as far as students that are successful, I haven't dropped a class or failed a class since I've been here. That's great. And I was dropped out of my international relations class. It's a poli-sci class, and I'm like 2 semesters away from graduating and hopefully transferring. And I need that class to transfer. It's not required for me to graduate and get my associates here, but it is required for me to transfer to another UC. And that's my question, okay, what do I do? Just keep working on more classes here just further my education here at that 2 years.
Take up more seats?
Exactly.
Take up more seats? Take up more seats from others?
I would talk to your division. I would talk to the division chair in that, because they can get in that
one
case
class. I'll be taking
for that one class. They can waive it or do a substitution and have another poli-sci class to replace the international. That'll help you get out.
Did you take that first class that is now required by a lot of the students coming in, the freshman students? Because I believe that is more money that we could be giving to our biology teachers and other teachers. A lot of us students, like the successful ones that will get our AAs and go on, didn't need that class to begin with, and so now to me it's just a waste of money.
Is that the orientation?
Yeah, because I know that they also have not only an orientation class, but or an orientation, but they also have a class kind of dedicated to it, don't they?
Like student success class?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that came out of a lot of the research on Student Success Task Force and other national organizations that says students do a lot better if they have an orientation class during their first semester. And I understand that for some people, probably like you,
that's a waste of money though, because they should be learning that in the high schools.
And again,
that's another question. Our high school system
is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. They're just throwing a bunch of students that are
on a roll, Paul.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't want to interrupt. I think it's wonderful. Thank you for coming and talking with folks. I have the theater until about 9 o'clock, so I need to interrupt. I want to first of all thank the Sustainability Club folks for coming and making dinner for everybody. And don't leave without dinner. But there are sprinkled in the crowd here. I know that there are probably English 1 students that are looking for extra credit for coming and watching the film tonight. Twist my arm, and I could probably arrange to give you extra credit for writing up what you're hearing here tonight, because I think it's sustainable education is just as important as sustainable food systems.
Metaphorically.
Hey, you explained that to me metaphorically.
The thing I'll say, for the camera and everything else, is that I think what people get mixed up on, and it's been happening for a year, and I think it's just kind of been a good, convenient way to mislead people if you want to be misled, is that when we get money for Tulare or anything on construction, the state sends us money. They don't send it directly to our contractors. They send it to us to disperse. That money comes in and it lands in our, what they call, capital projects account, and then when the contractors bill us, we pay that. Now, once all those jobs are done, the state's no longer paying us money, we don't owe anybody anything, there'll be a couple $100,000 in there. And I think at one point there was $8 or $9 million because a quarter ended when the state sent us a bunch of money and the contractors hadn't invoiced us yet. And I think, this was like a year ago, people started thinking, oh, there's $8 million in the reserve. And it's just not true. That's a capital improvements account.
All right, then if that's true, why do you keep saying misled? Because saying misled, who stands to gain from misleading the student body?
I don't know, and I don't want to speculate on that.
But you keep saying misled.
Somebody's clearly told you we had $14 million in reserves. You are misled. So
what do you mean by misled? There are other words besides misled. You repeatedly say misled.
I think you've been misled.
By who? Who stands to gain?
I don't know. You may have misled yourself by I don't know where you got your information, but it's not accurate. So you've been misled.
So go to jail for this, but I actually have friends who are hackers, and we wound up. I'm not kidding. We were able to get that documentation.
Turn the camera off. Yeah. Turn the camera off.
Okay.
Our campus cop is gone, right? I don't want to get arrested, but no, we do have that
There's the chief.
documentation.
We have a couple undercovers here.
Okay, yeah, just I know this is very elementary, but is the administration going to put together any kind of fundraising or something that students can do going out into the community?
We do a ton of fundraising right now to fund a lot of things, the drama, the art, the athletics. So much of our extracurricular stuff is done through fundraising, primarily so that funds on this campus don't have to be used for that. They've been cut substantially over the years, and so indirectly that's already happening because those areas are depending less and less on general fund dollars, more and more on fundraise dollars. So the general fund dollars can be used for other purposes.
Yeah, that's gonna have to be. It's gonna have to come up.
Brent, if I could, I just wanted to clarify one thing.
Yes.
When you hear Brent talk about the funds, there are requirements by law that different reserves have to be in place for different things. For example, retiree benefits. The college has to have so much money set aside to pay for those in the future. Otherwise, when they go to borrow money, they get a higher interest rate, or they can't borrow money at all. So if they don't keep certain amounts of funds in reserve, aside from losing accreditation and being put on probation by the state, they also get a higher interest rate.
So the interest rate is for the bond?
I'm the chief of police here.
Oh, I was wondering.
So the interest rate,
Oh, you're just COS police. Never mind. Okay.
and the interest rate that goes for the people like the taxpayers and the people that invest in institutions like the bond.
I think the interest rate, well, for example, the interest he's talking about is if our money's just sitting somewhere and not drawing interest, it's not being used properly. So we try to draw some interest just to further that amount.
Well, and that, and for example, Brent said the state's deferring dollars to us. Well, we have to borrow money to pay salaries because we don't get the money from the state.
Until that money comes in.
We have to pay interest on that money we borrow.
We're getting about $10, $12 million deferred into next year, but we're spending it right now. We have to make payroll, to keep the lights on, things like that. It's called cash flow. Cash flow is different than what we talk about here. Cash flow is just the money you have on hand to pay your bills. If they give us $40 million for the year, they don't give us $40 million July 1. They spread it out over the year. It used to be we'd get 12 equal payments. Now, not so. We'll go months without drawing anything from the state, and they'll push a lot of it, maybe up to a third of it, into next year, so they don't have to claim it on this year's budget. It's a smoke and mirrors game. Yes.
I've heard a lot of teachers say, okay, we need to use this much, or else we're going to lose it after a week or two. Where does that money go after the division? Like, say the science division has X amount of money, and they have Y left over after all their spending, and then they have 2 weeks left to spend the rest, or else that money goes back. Where does it go back to?
It goes back to the general fund. In fact, in most years, last year was probably the first year that it swept back into the general fund just to cover the deficits that we're currently having. In years past, we didn't like that practice because, frankly, I don't like to hear, oh, we have 2 weeks left to spend this. Let's buy 52 markers, even though we don't need them. I don't like that. So we used to
still do that.
I know they do. We used to just let people roll it over, though. We'd say, hey, if you don't spend it, roll it over, and you can use it next year. We'd stop people from doing that. Last year, we didn't do that. Some people still did that, but for the most part, we were able to sweep back a couple $100,000 to help out with the deficits.
I would just like a confirmation on board meeting. Are you guys going to have one on the 7th? Because I know that you're going to have the candidates come here on the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
I was just making sure there's still going to be one next Monday.
We don't have, there's no board meeting scheduled for the 7th. It's always the second.
So the website is wrong?
It's always the second Monday.
Yeah,
the website
is misleading.
Yeah, we looked on the COS website for the date of it. But yeah, I know you guys are having one here on the 14th.
Yeah, it's always the
for the
second Monday. Yes. Nothing next Monday night.
For that 8% that he is going to cannot change anybody's mind if we cannot do that 8%. How fast are we going to know which classes were cut, and how fast are we going to know which classes are being taken differently?
I would say within the next week or two, because I know the academic people are trying to figure out what classes have the least amount of students in. A lot of them maybe, or a few of them may not have instructors yet. They're trying to identify those as well.
Right, so basically, there'll be enough time for everybody to situate themselves and know what they're going to do for next semester.
Yes.
If their classes
You won't be finding out like in July or something like that.
It'll be before the semester ends.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
before you guys go watch your movie or whatever, anybody who needs contact info for legislators and the governor, so you can send an email. Everybody's got. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's good information.
Yeah.
Just taking that.
That's good information. If you're concerned about this, that's good information right there.
And I've already talked